Yeah, and again, that's what's been done. Though I have to say, for a party that's behind Donald Trump, to hear anyone pontificate about obeying the rules is a little rich. But putting that aside, I do think if you look at the races in Georgia, the Senate certainly could have been in Republican hands if Donald Trump hadn't bashed on mail-in voting so far. Because don't so much because let's forget, right? David Perdue got 49.7% of the vote in that general against John Ossoff, or in the jungle primary, if you will. And then fewer people voted in the primary than in the general, and then the general than the primary, and fewer people voted in the runoff than they did in the general. And that was because of Trump bashing on mail-in voting. I think, again, you want to have the most possible people vote. If you look at states that do all mail-in voting, like Oregon and Colorado, there's no fraud. There's no fraud in general. And that really asked me one question, because you seem, you're a very educated and a pragmatic guy in a lot of ways, Congressman. But do you believe that the 2020 election was stolen?
I believe that there were so many irregularities and so many court challenges which were not allowed, and so many voices that were canceled at that time, and that the mainstream media's monopoly on the coverage back then, and their cancellation of all conservatives who wanted to have that debate, makes me scratch my head quite a bit.
Well, let me refine the question. Do you think there was enough?
I don't have knowledge.
Do you think there was enough potential fraud to change the outcome? Because
sure. Oh yeah.
So you really think that Donald Trump would be president if all the fraud claims that you say weren't processed or addressed had been addressed?
Well, I'd like to add them all up, right? The burden is on me there was a ton of fraud, right? There were 3 times more ballots sent out than voters.
I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you. That was a point that Doug Burgum tried to make, and that's BS. What was happening is ballot applications that were sent out. People get 2 or 3 applications, and then they send in one of those applications to get their one real ballot. So I'm glad you brought that up, because this is just typical of the subterfuge that so many Republicans are using to try to kowtow to Trump.
Well, getting back to the question you asked me, is you only needed about 10,000 votes in several of these key states. And there were so many, the Zuckerbucks.
44,000 in 3 states.
Let me finish a point here so I could spit out my point. But these Zuckerbucks, it's just curious that they just magically happen to be distributed in the 7 key states in the Democrat key precincts. And now on the left, right, with the Republicans, we used to be these country club guys. I certainly never was one. But now all the magnificent 7 trillionaires are on the left, and some of them are working some nonsense, and then they own the big news networks online, et cetera. And there's no doubt that happened. And so how do you score that in retrospect? It's hard to do. But do I think that all those added together would come up to 10,000 votes per state? Yeah.
Okay. Well, all I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to Carrie, but Chris Cobb, who before he was fired, of course, said from the Trump administration that this was the safest and most secure election that we've ever had. And it's really sad, because we should have given ourselves a collective pat on the back for not only running such a safe, secure election, but having record turnout in the middle of the worst pandemic.
Yeah, well, that's okay, years. But 60 to 70% of the voters in polls do not share that confidence. He said it when, and any guy that said that was part of the Trump administration. Where are they working now? Right? I want to know
70% of Republicans, not of voters.
Where's he working now? The guy you just mentioned.
Well, he got fired. But anyway,
now where's he working now? I mean, when people make comments like that, it's always curious, right, where they end up with a nice contract.
Well, so where was he working? But anyway,
where was he working? Where's he working now? And then the polling doesn't match your description. The American people are very unsettled with this election business. And we could go on. It's not worth it. It's just
okay.
Well, the easiest way is to move forward and count all the votes in public, and put them in front of the judges. Then if we both agree on that, there's no more issues going forward.
I agree with that. Dave, Brat, one thing you also mentioned I think is important, and I think we got to wrap soon, but the media, I think,
Yeah.
completely failed. And
Yeah.
you actually look at polling about the Hunter Biden story, the laptops,
Yeah.
it was determinative. People said that it would have swayed their vote
Yes,
against
I know.
Biden if
Yeah.
that story had been true, or I'm
Yeah.
sorry, if it had been allowed to be. I mean, you had this, I think it was misinformation. You had dozens of intelligence experts say this had the classic fingerprints of Russian disinformation, and that
Yeah.
was a complete lie. And
Yeah.
and the polls show that that was determinative in terms of it swayed the outcome,
Sure.
because it wasn't given the actual credence that it needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I try not to just go overtly into the political things, but you get guests on this. Well, look at Trump, surely Trump, but the same spokespeople forget to mention we had RussiaGate for 3 years, which was determinatively false, and of course Rachel Maddow's head was popping off on RussiaGate for 3 years in a row. All the crimes that were committed. Nothing about 51 national security advisors of high repute and esteem signed their name to a document that was a lie. We got Burisma, we got China checks. Right. I mean, I could go on and on with the politics. It's never ending. Hopefully the American people just start voting in both sides, people who tell the truth again. But that seems to be a lot to ask.
Well, I would just say that again. I think that the Russia, the connections between the Trump administration and Russia during the campaign were exaggerated, but they were not non-existent. So I don't think it was a hoax. But I would also say that Trump turned out to be Putin's puppet when he was in office. So I think it was certainly a harbinger of what was going to happen.
No, it's much more brilliant, as Biden has done, to drive Russia straight into the arms of China and Iran. Now, boy, that's some geopolitics. That's a genius right there. So it's like, if you break that up, then you love Putin and you're a fascist or something. I mean, it's just ridiculous on its face.
He took Putin over the side of his own intelligence agency. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's never
On
criticism.
What? On
Putin,
what?
Putin wouldn't have had to invade Ukraine if Trump had been president because he was getting everything that he wanted. Trump was on the way to dissolving NATO. He never criticism.
Yeah.
He coddles dictators.
Ukraine, I have 2 data points for you. The United States, who's in favor of democracy, ran a coup d'etat on Ukraine in 2014. Oops, not too good for the theory there, right? Just followed John Mearsheimer, Chicago, the greatest geopolitical guy of our times on all the history of Ukraine. Second data point is 2022. Putin put down a peace plan, and NATO walks away, led by the United States of America. So all we've done is annihilated young Ukrainian men, and now the women are being shoved into the charnel house. And over what? Over the fact that the Ukrainians could have got rich. They were a democracy. They were fine. But the U.S. wanted to shove them right up against Russia so we could have a NATO ally there for our purposes to achieve what?
There was never any serious talk about admitting Ukraine to NATO. I mean, that Biden had never said that, and also
then why?
I'm hearing rationalizing to invade a sovereign country, upset
why
a world order that
existed
for 75 years.
Why did they invade a sovereign country? Putin told you, you're not going to have a NATO member and a Euro member up against Russia. We wouldn't want that up against the United States and Mexico, would we? No,
I agree, but this is I think a BS talking point where people say that Biden was pushing Ukraine NATO membership. He was not. But anyway,
the United States was under him and still are, and prosecuting a war that's slaughtering the young kids in Ukraine.
So the war is more the U.S.'s fault than Russia's fault?
The lead up to it and the geopolitical errors were the fault of the U.S. Right now, if you say Russia could have rolled over Ukraine in 5 seconds, right? But they're the Slavic people. They don't want to kill them. They have to live there in that neighborhood.
Russia also has a much more inept army than people thought, which was shown. I don't think that it was done out of the good of people's hearts. But
Yeah,
Kerry,
well,
I'll give you the last
point
word.
is,
Yeah.
it's over. It's been over for 2 years. Everybody knows that they have to form a peace agreement, and yet for some reason, DOD and the arms guys and whatever are all pleading for more money and more. There's nothing more inefficient to economic growth than going and blowing up a bunch of bombs. And there's nothing worse for our moral outlook than killing a bunch of young people. So I'm a no.